Welcome to Vinnie Politan Investigates. The lead investigator in a homicide is obviously a crucial part of the case. This is the person who is steering the investigation, following the leads, and building the case against the suspect. That's why everyone was shocked and appalled when they learned about the text messages sent by the lead investigator in the Karen Reed murder trial. I've covered this case in depth on my weeknight show, Closing Arguments, and what you're about to see are some of the most important moments from that program as I investigate the tragic death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. It was a frantic situation in front of Brian and Nicole Albert's home in Canton, Massachusetts on the morning of January 29th, 2022. Police, emergency vehicles, first responders, and 3 civilian women were on the scene. On the front lawn of that home, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, partially buried in the snow, frozen and lifeless. It was the scene of a tragic death, and prosecutors say it was murder. One of the 3 women who had pulled up to the scene was Karen Reed. She was described as hysterical by witnesses. She was John O'Keefe's girlfriend. She attempted CPR before first responders arrived. She was physically and mentally shaken. Witnesses say she was repeating the phrase, "I hit him, I hit him." Prosecutors believe that's a confession and have charged Karen Reed with the murder. Karen Reed doesn't agree. In fact, she's claiming her innocence and says she dropped John off at a party inside that house, and someone in that house murdered John and conspired with local and state police to frame her. And now the lead investigator on the stand and in the hot seat, being confronted by the defense with unprofessional, inappropriate comments he allegedly made about the investigation and the defendant, Karen Reed. Tonight, we'll examine the testimony of Trooper Michael Proctor as we continue our investigation into the tragic death of Officer John O'Keefe. So joining me tonight, former Houston Police Department homicide detective Phil Waters is back with us. Phil, great to see you. This is going to be a very different kind of interview. I've never done one quite like this because I wrote down my questions here. I have not shown them to you, but I have a series of questions I want to ask you because I want your expert opinion, with all your experience, your honest opinion about these. So let me begin with this first one, and I have a bunch of them to get to. Would you recuse yourself from an investigation if you had to interview witnesses who were good friends with your sister who happens to be your best friend?
Well, aloha, Vinny, from the Big Island. Thanks for having me back. I tell you, a question like that, it's going to be related to the circumstances. So I would have to have a little bit broader perspective if I was just going to give a yes or no answer on that.
Okay, so it's not an automatic. So it's not an automatic recusal if, in fact, you have to interview witnesses who were friends with your sister.
No, because I would have. Now I will tell you this: the other side of that coin is that if I felt like I was compromised in any way that would affect that investigation, I would immediately recuse myself. So that's the answer, I think, to that question. But again, it depends on the circumstances.
No, that's a perfect answer. That's a perfect answer. I wanted to know if it would be like automatic, and it's not. But you have to like look at it and say, okay, is that going to compromise me? Next one. If a body was found on the front lawn of a home near the street, but on that front lawn, would you search that home as part of your investigation?
Only if evidence led me to procure a search warrant or get a consent to search. Only if the evidence led me that direction. Okay,
so again, not automatic. Not automatic. You would need something to get you there. Fair enough.
Right.
Okay, let me ask you this one, because you've investigated so many cases. Could you be certain about a suspect's guilt 16 hours into the investigation, excluding anyone else?
Again, it would depend on the type of investigation. If we have an investigation we call a smoking gun, we know who the person is, there's no doubt that this is the person who committed the act, then the answer to that question would be sure. If it is a whodunit, which in this case, it's kind of a mix between the two, it would take, it's a possibility that you could come to that conclusion given on the evidence that you know at the time, but then you have to be open-minded and objective to letting the evidence lead you in a different direction if that's in fact what happens.
Okay. Would you continue seeking homicide charges if the medical examiner's determination was undetermined?
And you're talking about the manner of death?
Yes.
That they didn't rule it? Yeah. Well, there's a possibility. Again, we're talking about possibilities here. It depends on the case. It depends on the circumstances. But just to offer an aside on this particular case, I think that she's been overcharged with the murder. So to me, this lays out as a vehicular manslaughter.
Gotcha.
But, you know, I just, I think they're really reaching for the murder thing.
Okay. Now, this is the strange part of the interview, Phil, and I apologize ahead of time, but there's a bunch of inappropriate things that were allegedly done here. If I'm going to give you a scale from 0 to 10 on how inappropriate it is, if it's really inappropriate, 10, not inappropriate at all, 0, I'm just going to read a bunch of things. Just give me a number, and then I have one question at the bottom of it, okay? Does that work for you? Okay. Thanks so much, Phil. And I apologize. This is such a strange interview. Okay.
Do I get a prize at the end of the...
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. 0 to 10. Referring to the suspect as a whack job with your superiors in text messages.
On a scale, I'd say 11.
11. Okay. Speaking to your sister about witnesses you have to interview as part of the investigation.
He's phrasing it that way, that he has to interview them?
People that he's going to interview, talking to your sister about the people he's going to interview before he interviews them.
It would be circumstances, but that's on the low end, maybe a 2 or a 3.
Okay. Texting with your high school buddies about an ongoing investigation 16 hours into that investigation.
That's a 12.
Texting about the body and the hotness of a suspect with your high school buddies 16 hours into an investigation.
That's a 15.
Searching a suspect's phone without having first determined if there were any attorney-client communications on that phone once you confiscate it.
Well, again, that would depend on the circumstances. Did he get a consent to search? Did he have a search warrant and so forth and so on? So I don't know that I would even put that on a scale, not knowing what the circumstances were at the time.
Okay, and I've got one more. Texting with your superiors about looking for nude pictures of the suspect on her confiscated phone.
No, that's another 15. That's off the charts.
Okay. If someone did all this, could they be fair and impartial in the investigation?
Well, you're using the term fair. You know, in my business, fair is what you pay a taxi. So I would say objective and impartial. Given all of that, the preponderance of the evidence here would be that he's already skewed to an opinion early on into this investigation based on some things that really have nothing to do with the investigation. So I would say in this particular case, it leaves the appearance that he was not objective and, to use your word, not impartial when he got into this stuff.
Phil Waters, legendary homicide detective, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate your honesty and your expertise. Coming up next.
He believed that this was Karen Reed and never looked in any other direction except for the target that he wanted, which was Karen Reed. He didn't know about Brian Higgins' phone calls because Brian Higgins extracted his own cell phone and only provided 2 pairs of text messages that Michael Proctor said today, yeah, that's not unusual for a witness, to do that once in a while. But then when he's confronted about what he says in front of the feds, He told the feds that that's never happened to him before. So this man is lying. His credibility is shot.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates continues next, only on Court TV.
It's a controversial case that's divided a community.
Karen Reed is accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend. Will the truth finally be revealed?
The killer or cover-up murder trial today, only on Court TV.
When a body is found on the front lawn of a house, should the people who were in the house be looked at as possible suspects? The answer depends upon who you ask. Here's more of our investigation of the death of Officer John O'Keefe.
As the lead investigator and the case agent, you're aware it's also your responsibility and your obligation to investigate all potential individuals, right? All potential suspects.
Yes.
You're obligated to investigate anybody who would have a motive, a means, and an opportunity to commit the crime or the offense, correct?
Correct.
Motive includes anything from financial gain to could just be revenge, right?
Yes.
Could be a lover's quarrel, correct?
Yes.
Or it could be someone who's interested in someone romantically, correct?
Could be an argument inside of a vehicle.
Oh, you saw what he did there, right? So this is the big setup by Alan Jackson, the attorney, setting up the other potential suspect in the case. Let's take a look at how that went. His name is Brian Higgins.
You waited until February 10th to conduct a pre-scheduled interview with Mr. Higgins, didn't you?
Yes.
And you interviewed him in the presence of his attorney, correct?
Correct.
He told you that he was engaged in a flirtatious relationship with Miss Reed?
He did.
As a matter of fact, he told you that he was engaged in a flirtatious relationship with Miss Reed over text messages, but on at least one occasion that resulted in a kiss, correct?
Yes.
And then he also told you that he had taken the liberty to extract certain conversations from his own cell phone, right?
Correct.
And he brought you a hard copy of those text messages, right?
He did.
And you knew that those text messages were messages that he curated to give to you, right?
Yes.
He's the one that made the determination of what was important, what was not important to give to you, his interviewer, right?
Objection.
Was that your understanding, Trooper?
It was my understanding Mr. Higgins was being very forthcoming by providing those messages. It's not uncommon for witnesses to take screenshots or send us emails or send us text messages, so he just had a different means of producing text messages.
So you became aware pretty early on that Mr. Higgins at least had a motive to want to visit harm on John O'Keefe, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No, absolutely not.
Well, you knew he had this flirtatious relationship with Karen Reed, is that right?
Yes.
You became aware that he ignored, you saw the text messages, you became aware that Karen Reed actually ignored text messages from Mr. Higgins while at the Waterfall Bar and Grill with John O'Keefe, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yes.
And you're aware that at 12:20 a.m., Brian Higgins sent a text message to John O'Keefe, coaxing him to 34 Fairview, correct?
Objection.
I'll see you at sidebar on this.
Do you recall a text from Brian Higgins to John O'Keefe after they left Waterfall? Where are you at?
I don't recall that one either.
Did you know that on January 29th at 2:22 a.m., there was a call between him and Brian Albert that morning?
I was not aware of that.
Might have been important to your investigation, don't you think?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Depends what that. I don't know what the call was about.
I'm sorry, finish that.
I don't know what the call was about. I don't know if they actually connected and communicated what the length of the call was, so.
Right. And you never asked, did you?
I was unaware that call took place.
All right, let's get some reaction. Let's bring in our trial insiders. Joining us tonight, Karen Reed supporter, creator of Justice for Officer John O'Keefe and Karen Reed Facebook page, Nick Rocco. Also with us, criminal defense attorney, college instructor, and author, Peter Ellikin. And the YouTuber behind Yellow Cottage Tales, Kevin Lenahan, is back with us as well. Great to see everyone tonight. Nick, this was a big, big day for the defense. This moment, though, is interesting to me because it's not just about undermining Trooper Proctor's lack of investigation. It's some finger pointing taking place. What do you think? Is this the guy?
Well, it clearly shows that from day one, he believed that this was Karen Reed and never looked in any other direction except for the target that he wanted, which was Karen Reed. He didn't know about Brian Higgins' phone calls because Brian Higgins extracted his own cell phone and only provided 2 pairs of text messages that Michael Proctor said today, yeah, that's not unusual for a witness, to do that once in a while. But then when he's confronted about what he says in front of the feds, he told the feds that that's never happened to him before. So this man is lying. His credibility is shot. At this point in the case, Adam Lally should have never redirected him. He should have just let him get off the stand. The jury does not believe anything from this man. And at this point, I think the jury is focused more on Proctor than anything else that was talked about in this case. So the Commonwealth really, really had a big loss today and basically all week. There really hasn't been a win for the prosecution. There's so much reasonable doubt in this case that the jury's going to have their selection on which way they want to go with this when it's time to make a decision. This case is over.
Still to come.
The defense's theory depends not on showing that Trooper Proctor had tunnel vision about this case or had family connections or had obnoxious texts. It depends on them showing, to back up their claim, that Karen Reed was framed.
And then he also told you that he had taken the liberty to extract certain conversations from his own cell phone, right?
Correct.
And he brought you a hard copy of those text messages, right?
He did.
And you knew that those text messages were messages that he curated to give to you, right?
Yes.
The true test of any witness in any case is how they hold up on cross-examination. And for lead investigator Trooper Proctor, his time on the stand being crossed was not fun. Kevin, what'd you think about it? What'd you think about that cross-examination today?
I tell you what Nick just said was really interesting. He said that Proctor, that first day, believed it was Karen Reed. But Nick's whole theory and the defense's whole theory they've been pushing is that Proctor knew that it was Colin or something else, and they were trying to frame Karen Reed. That's a very different issue than talking about tunnel vision, where an investigator seizes on a leaf too quickly instead of searching everything else. So I also noticed today that they didn't, like Johnny Cochran asked Mark Furman back in the day, have you ever planted evidence? They didn't ask Michael Proctor that. They didn't ask him, did he plant evidence in this case? And the defense's theory depends not on showing that Trooper Proctor had tunnel vision about this case or had family connections or had obnoxious texts. It depends on them showing, to back up their claim, that Karen Reed was framed, because the physical evidence indisputably links Karen's SUV to the crime. So unless somebody planted all that evidence, and we had 9 troopers at the scene, and then the 2 inside the garage that would all have to be in on it. Unless they're all in on it, there's no conspiracy, and Karen did it.
How much damage today, Peter Ellikin? And is this a case about a bad investigation by a bad lead investigator, or is it being established that someone is being framed here?
First of all, yeah, I think that at this point, the prosecution's case is an absolute free fall. It's been a bloodbath the last couple of days of court. And then I wanted to put that caveat. I have seen cases, we've all seen it, turn around, somebody gets, at the last minute. I won't rule out that the prosecution can win here. You've seen people do a grand slam in the bottom of the 9th, but at the moment, it looks really, really bad. And one of the problems that I do have here is, and forget about that Proctor may be unlikable to the jury now and all the repugnant, vile, horrible things that he said that may just disgust everybody. I'm going on the evidence, really, and the way that he conducted his investigation. Again, it came out under cross-examination today that he decided that he would not even investigate anything inside the house.
So are you now, is this a rush to judgment case or a frame? Like rush to judgment, I've seen that many times since OJ. but a frame job is something completely different. Like, these are two different things.
But let's keep in mind, we haven't heard the defense yet. We've only heard the prosecution side. Certainly the defense is going to bring that up again and again. I mean, normally most cases, prosecution has a clear sailing when they present their case, and maybe defense can knock a few holes in it, ask some questions, but then we have to wait until the defense goes. Here, the prosecution has not done well, and it's still their case right now. But I want to hear, this case is not like over yet. We haven't heard
it's not over. It's not over till it's over. Trial's a living, breathing entity. Things happen that we don't expect. I want to play one other quick moment here. Take a look at this, because this was something that was actually stricken by the judge.
Ms. Dianetti shows up at my sister's school yesterday in the parking lot where he's not welcomed, or where people are not supposed to be, with one of their witnesses and their private investigator. And a teacher sees this, it informs Ms. Dianetti that he can't be there, and instead of saying okay and leaving, he asks, is Courtney Proctor in the building? Does she work here? She calls me to see if she was being served.
Objection. Can we approach?
It was all stricken, but Peter, in just like 10 seconds, tell me, does this happen? Do like the lawyers show up at one of the witnesses' sister's parking lot to serve a witness in the middle of the case?
No, normally that wouldn't happen, but I want to hear the other side here. I mean, I don't necessarily, we've caught Proctor in so many lies and examinations, and I can point them out, that I'm not ready to just go on that and make a decision that just happened.
Gotcha. The credibility of every witness is crucial. It is how a jury determines if they're telling the truth. But when the credibility in question involves the lead investigator, the credibility of the entire case is now subject to scrutiny. That's why the testimony of Trooper Proctor is so important. The question is, how will the jury judge him? As a man looking for the truth, or a biased investigator trying to hide the truth? I'm Vinnie Politan. Thanks for joining the investigation, and I'll see you weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern on Closing Arguments. Welcome to Vinnie Politan Investigates. The timeline of a murder investigation can speak volumes. It can tell you who had the opportunity to commit the crime. It can also eliminate suspects. That's why the timeline in the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe is crucial. When was he killed, and who exactly had the opportunity to do it? I've covered this case in depth on my weeknight show, Closing Arguments, and what you're about to see are some of the most important moments from that program as I investigate the tragic death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. What happened to Boston police officer John O'Keefe on January 29th, 2022? The night began as a typical Friday. John met some friends at a bar in downtown Canton, Massachusetts called C.F. McCarthy's. After he was there for a while, his girlfriend Karen Reed met him. Karen was a college professor and had been dating John for a couple of years. A little later that night, they walked across the street to another bar, the Waterfall. Also at the Waterfall were John's old neighbors and a fellow Boston police officer, Brian Albert. When the Waterfall closed at midnight, Brian Albert invited everyone over to his house for an after-hours party. And that's when things become much less clear about exactly what happened. Prosecutors say Karen dropped John off at the party, but instead of driving away, she threw her car in reverse, going 24 miles per hour for 60 feet, purposely running over John and then driving away to let him die in the cold. Meanwhile, Karen Reed and her attorneys say that never happened. John went into that party, he was ambushed, and then put on the front yard to die in the cold. They also claim the lead investigator planted evidence to frame Karen Reed for the murder. Tonight, we take a look at surveillance video and digital evidence tracking the movements of Karen Reed. Did she drive by the crime scene an hour before returning to the scene with two other witnesses? What does the DNA evidence prove in this case? We'll take a look as we continue to investigate the tragic death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe.
I observed a large black SUV here on Washington Street.
And the large black SUV that you observed, is that consistent with what you've observed of the defendant's vehicle?
Yes.
And if you could describe to the jury, as far as when I asked Ms. Gilman to press play, what is that vehicle going into?
It's going to continue north on Washington Street through the intersection on Sherman and continue north on Washington Street.
And what, if anything, is sort of in that directionality as it continues off of the screen to the left?
Be heading towards Temple Beth Abraham. At approximately 12:17 and 56 seconds, you'll see a large black SUV travel from left to right on the screen, which again would be northbound.
And again, left to right on the screen, for orientation purposes, what is in the direction from left to right on the screen as far as of any significance to this?
As you continue north on Washington Street, you would, I believe the next intersection on the left is Dedham Street, which one could take to get to 34 Fairview Road.
All right, folks, now we're in a place where maybe we can put together a little bit of a timeline based upon some of these things that are being laid out. Let's do that right now. Let's take a look first. We begin at 12:15 a.m. Karen Reed, John O'Keefe in her car, driving north on Washington past the library at the intersection of Sherman. You see the little red light and you see the surveillance video. Okay, that makes sense. We're starting to make some progress here. 12:17, Karen Reed and John O'Keefe drive north on Washington past the Temple. Okay, they're making their way. They're going in the direction of the Alberts house. At that point, prosecutors say they could have turned left onto Dedham Street. From Dedham Street, they maybe made a left turn onto Cedar Crest and a left turn onto Fairview. I don't know. I don't think it really matters, like what route they took getting there, other than the fact that there's no more videos from anyone's house. That's a little problematic. But here's what I found very significant in trying to put together a timeline. When did this murder take place, according to the prosecution? Take a listen to Lieutenant Brian Tully now talking about the information they're getting from the cell phone, which has times associated with it. Take a close listen.
First, we're looking at the area of the town of Canton. I've placed different landmarks, again, to give context to what we're talking about here. You see 34 Fairview Road as a yellow house icon, 1 Meadows Ave, Canton as a darker color, and the Waterfall Bar and Grill as another icon. Now, off to the left, just west of Route 95, which you'll see running here, you'll see a red triangle, which I use consistently as the antenna, and a series of letters and numbers next to them. So next to them is the numbering system that Verizon assigns to that antenna. So in this instance, we're looking at ENB, which is the antenna acronym, and specifically 57171.
And to be clear, as far as that marking with the red triangle, the ENB ID 57171, that is the antenna that the handset or the defendant's cell phone is connecting to at that point, correct?
Yes, and I always try to be clear that that is the antenna. That's not where I'm saying the handset was.
So the handset is somewhere in that vicinity based on your training experience, is that correct?
Yes, 12:35 to 12:37 a.m.
And again, if you could, using the laser pointer before you, direct the jury's attention to what, if anything, of significance or relevance you depicted in this representation.
So those same icons appear as about the locations relative to this investigation. You'll see another red triangle here close to Route 95, which is NEB ID 57286. And during this time period, the handset associated with this account communicates with that antenna.
And from the locations of significance or relevance, as far as ENB ID 57286, which of them is it closest to in this depiction?
It's just north of 34 Fairview Road. This comes from one call that occurred at 12:38 a.m.
And as far as, if you could, again, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to what, if any, other locations you identified or signified in this representation.
Again, same icons further south at the bottom. The antenna is located here at the intersection of Route 93 and 138, and it's ENB ID 57021.
And of those locations of interest that you signified within this slides, where is ENB ID 57021 in relation to those?
If you think back to the previous slide, so now we've moved a little bit further east. Here's Fairview Road, and here is 1 Meadows Ave.
Coming up next.
None of this makes sense because everybody had eyes on her outside that. You had 3 or 4 people looking out the window watching every move Karen made. They saw her vehicle move 3-4 times. Jen McCabe sent a text message around 12:41, I think it was. She was already home. So none of this timeline makes sense.
We're in the final stretch as the case against Karen Reed nears its end. Plus, Friday, hear from the loved ones left behind with a voice for victims.
Opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
And when she couldn't find a hitman, she decided to use her son, Jason.
She said, no one is going to be getting in the way of me collecting that insurance money, or they'll wind up just like Norm.
Accomplice to Murder with Vinnie Politan. Sunday night, 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
It's amazing how our locations can be tracked by our devices. The technology is amazing and often makes a difference in a homicide case. Here's more of our investigation of the death of Officer John O'Keefe. Let me bring in my guests, our insiders joining us tonight. Karen Reed supporter and creator of the Justice for Officer John O'Keefe and Karen Reed Facebook page, Nick Rocco, and the YouTuber behind Yellow Cottage Tales, Kevin Lenahan, with us. Okay, Kevin, so am I interpreting this evidence correctly that really wasn't like being delivered in an easy way to consume, okay?
Never is.
Well, no, I watch trials year after year, month after month here on Court TV, and sometimes it is very clear. It was clear down in South Carolina in the Murdoch case. Okay, so is the murder window here 12:35 to 12:38?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the murder window, we also have that John's phones. We're getting, see, some of this stuff, we're getting these pieces of the puzzle, right? And we have to just patiently wait for the rest. And a lot of it's going to come from Trooper Garino.
But she's home at 12:41, right? She's home at 12:41. That's the missing videotape, the ring video, 12:41. Trooper DeChico.
Seems to be, but Proctor indicated 12:34 the other day too, so I'm not sure until we see the actual.
Okay.
You know, they're going to.
So explain this to me, and then we'll get Nick's take on this. The question I have is, this is not a super large window of time, but Ricky D and Ryan Nagel and Heather are behind them, right? Like, how long are they there? Wouldn't they have witnessed this then? If it's this small window of time, why not?
You're talking to Nick, right?
No, I'm talking to you, Kevin.
I'm sorry. No, I mean, my understanding would be, so they arrived at 12:24 at the same time, and it takes 2 or 3 minutes for Nagel's sister to come out, and then they drove away, which probably would have been somewhere around 12:28, 12:29, and then John's phone stops moving at 12:32. So I believe that the truck that Nagel was in was gone, and then at 12:32, that's when the accident happened.
Okay, so this 12:35 time is not the entire window. Like it precedes. How long is Karen Reed there? I still don't know. Like when does she get there? Nick, what do you know about this? What time? If she gets home at 12:41, 12:38, she's moving away. They're telling me that it's connecting at 12:35, but is she there before 12:35?
So. She's definitely at 34 Fairview before 12:35, absolutely.
Okay, what time? How long is she there?
I think the one thing me and Kevin may agree on in this case is probably around 12:25 is when she gets probably around 34 Fairview. So I mean, we've talked
about. But the murder
this
can't take place then because the car's behind her, right? The Ryan, Ricky, and Heather are behind them.
Yep.
Because it didn't happen that way. That's why none of this makes sense, because everybody had eyes on her outside that. You had 3 or 4 people looking out the window watching every move Karen made. They saw her vehicle move 3-4 times. Jen McCabe sent a text message around 12:41, I think it was. She was already home. So none of this timeline makes sense. As far as the ping off that tower there, I believe that was while she was on her way back to 34, while she was on her way back to 1 Meadows Ave at John's house. So the reason why I believe that footage of Karen Reed pulling up to John's house is missing is because if you concrete a time that she arrived home, now it makes the timeline a lot harder for them to say, okay, well, she arrived at this time when she hit him, but then it's a 5-minute drive back here, so she got home at 12:41. That's why that video is missing. And we know DeChico had to have seen that video for him to put a 12:41 timestamp on that.
Okay, so
somebody saw that video.
The bottom line takeaway from this is that
voicemail, but yeah, go ahead.
The bottom line takeaway is it's got to be before 12:38, but like after when? 12:33, 12:34, 12:32? Do we know?
Well, John's phone stopped moving at 12:32, so I would say that was the time of the accident.
Still to come.
I'm sure John's driven the vehicle. That's most likely why you're going to see any of John's DNA on the car. I'm sure if they tested other places of that vehicle as well, John's DNA is going to be on that car. So as far as, who planted that hair, when was it planted, I can't specifically say who planted it. It's John's hair. It could have literally came from anywhere. How did they get a piece of hair to send to the lab to test to match up that piece of hair? Where did they get that piece of hair? The jury may look at the taillight and say, okay, why is his DNA on the taillight? But also, why are there 2 unknown DNAs on the taillight? And why are there unknown DNAs all over his clothes and on his shoes?
Many times, the 3 most powerful letters in a murder case are DNA. But the question in the Karen Reed murder trial is, can you trust the DNA?
Reaction to the DNA evidence today?
It means nothing, which is why, that's why you heard us ask those questions.
John's DNA was on his clothes.
You're saying that... What was that, Karen?
John's DNA was on his clothes.
What are you thinking as you're sitting there during this part of the testimony?
That it's a waste of taxpayer dollars.
So the defense doesn't seem concerned about the DNA evidence that was presented today. This is evidence of John O'Keefe connected to the back of Karen Reed's SUV. First, you've got the hair on the rear bumper, okay, on that quarter panel. We can take a look at a picture of that, right? So the hair is found there. Now, take a listen to the DNA analyst talking about that hair.
The mitochondrial DNA profile that was obtained from the sample, the hair sample, was consistent with the mitochondrial DNA profile obtained from John O'Keefe. So therefore, John O'Keefe cannot be excluded as a possible contributor of that hair.
Okay, and there's a second DNA sample that's taken. This is from the rear passenger taillight, the casing of it. And I don't know if it's clear what the source of the DNA is. Could be skin cells, saliva, I'm not sure. But it's from a swab. Here's what the analyst had to say about that.
Profile from the extract that you received as far as EO2, from the passenger side taillight of the vehicle. What, if anything, were you able to determine based on your analysis and SDR processing of that?
Yes, so we determined that it was consistent with a mixture of 3 individuals, including at least 1 male contributor. So in this case, when comparing the John O'Keefe profile, assuming a mixture of 3 individuals, it is at least 749 million times more likely to be observed if it originated from John O'Keefe and 2 unknown unrelated individuals than if from 3 unknown unrelated individuals.
All right, Nick. Now, let's be honest. If that stuff wasn't there, the defense would be jumping up and down saying, oh, there's not even any DNA on her car. But there is. There is. So what's the innocent explanation for this? And should it be a concern? It's a hair, and it's some other level of DNA that's on the taillight.
So as far as the hair goes, I think at this point, nobody believes that hair stayed on for over 70 miles of travel in a windy snowstorm. and not even being attached to anything. It's just a free-floating hair on the bumper. There is no way that anybody, even the jury, is going to believe that that hair stayed on.
Let me ask you
the entire time.
Is the allegation that it is Proctor that is putting the hair on there? If so, like when did he get the hair?
So, I mean, don't forget Karen's vehicle, right? I'm sure John's driven the vehicle. That's most likely why you're going to see any of John's DNA on the car. I'm sure if they tested other places of that vehicle as well, John's DNA is going to be on that car. So as far as, who planted that hair, when was it planted? I can't specifically say who planted it. It's John's hair. It could have literally came from anywhere. How did they get a piece of hair to send to the lab to test to match up that piece of hair? Where did they get that piece of hair? Probably the same place that they got this piece of hair to put on the bumper. So, I mean, as far as, I think the hair at this point isn't even going to be a question to the jury. The jury may look at the taillight and say, okay, why is his DNA on the taillight? But also, why are there two unknown DNAs on the taillight? And why are there unknown DNAs all over his clothes and on his shoes? So if you can't identify who these other unknown DNAs are, it really is irrelevant. So today we learned John had DNA on his clothes and also on his girlfriend's vehicle that he's been in multiple times and probably has driven.
So, Kevin, this isn't a case where, you catch a killer by having their DNA on the murder weapon, because the alleged murder weapon is the car, and obviously it's already connected to Karen Reed, so that's not an issue. It's sort of the opposite of that. How compelling do you think this is, or is this just a small piece of this puzzle that the prosecution's attempting to put together?
I think it's more a small piece, although it's a piece. It does tend to do a couple of things. For one thing, the idea of the dog attack, it just reinforces that that's impossible. Nick has gone with the idea that Proctor had the clothing in the back of his truck for 6 weeks and at some point went to the coin op and washed it. But there's DNA all over the clothing, including blood DNA, including Michael Proctor's DNA on the shirts, on the pants. Is there other DNA there? Of course there is. There's all kinds of other people that DNA is going to be on all of our clothing. Did somebody take that hair? If you're going to plant that hair, would you stick it on a vertical surface? No, you'd put it on the horizontal part of the bumper. So, I mean, these are just small pieces of the evidence. But, how much of the weight of the jury, we'll see.
Nick, seemed like you wanted to respond there.
No, so I know what the comment he's talking about, washing the clothes. Actually, what I said was I don't want to say they were washed, but the blood stains looked a lot faded. So that, just to correct that. Listen, we got 2 more weeks, I think. I think this trial is going to be over sometime of the week of June 24th to the 28th. The defense is, I think they're going to go 4 to 5 days. Hopefully the prosecution can finish up by tomorrow. But I think we only have about 2 weeks left of this. So whatever we're going to learn is going to come out within these next 2 weeks.
Are we going to hear voicemail messages from Karen Reed, Kevin?
Yeah, we are. And we got a long way to go. We got to get the Trooper DNA. The Trooper Garino will talk about all the data. We're going to hear the other data experts. We're also going to have the medical examiners. But most importantly, we got the CARS report that'll give the state's accident reconstruction theory. And we do need that.
And Nick, what do you think the defense is going to do in their case? And I don't expect Karen Reed to testify. They've got their own experts. Are there any other fact witnesses that the defense you would expect to bring in here to bring up a point, clarify something, or bring up some evidence that the prosecution has completely ignored?
So one quick thing, I think the defense is not going to even bother cross-examining the remainder of the witnesses that the prosecution calls. I think they are ready to put their case forward. And as far as what witnesses they have that they're going to call, we know they have the Fed experts that are going to confirm John wasn't hit by a vehicle and Karen's vehicle did not strike a body. You're going to have their Google experts come.
When there is no eyewitness to a murder, prosecutors need to get the evidence to speak to the jury. Physical evidence, DNA evidence, and digital evidence that can pinpoint movements and actions. In the case of accused killer Karen Reed, it seems like prosecutors will need all 3 to convince the panel of 12. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thanks for joining the investigation, and I'll see you weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern on Closing Arguments.